evening, everyone, and welcome to this Palestine Solidarity Campaign webinar. We did the first webinar on Jerusalem back on the 7th of April when the focus was very much on Sheikh Jarrah. At the time, in fact, quite a number of people in Sheikh Jarrah who started the action, started it with a very basic hashtag which said Save Sheikh Jarrah, have gone on knowingly or unknowingly to ignite a real chain of events that followed, which eventually led to Israel bombarding Gaza and what we saw in terms of the oppression of Palestinians across the whole of historic Palestine. But it did start in Sheikh Jarrah with that hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah, and behind it were a number of young people, including two who were on our last webinar, Muna and Muhammad Al-Kurd. We also hosted their father, Nabil Al-Kurd, who was able to tell us about the history of what happened and how we had got to the particular date. So if you do want to look back at that webinar, it is available on the Palestine Solidarity Campaign YouTube channel. My name is Kamel Hawwash. I'm the chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I also originate from Jerusalem. Both of my parents were born in Jerusalem before Israel was created. My father passed away here in the UK, and I wasn't able to take him back to Jerusalem to bury him in his city of birth. But those of you who remember the notorious Robert Maxwell should know that he was buried in Jerusalem. This shows you the discrimination that Palestinians face, that I couldn't even do that. But I always say, when my mother, who lives with me here in Birmingham, is able to go back to Jerusalem, I will feel that peace had come to the Holy Land. So welcome. We're focusing tonight on Jerusalem again. The title of the webinar is Let's Talk About Jerusalem. And we have three fantastic speakers. And I'm really delighted that there are new speakers to PSC because we're always trying to widen the network we have in Palestine. And I will introduce them very quickly, and then I'll go to our first speaker. So we have Khalil Tafakgi, who is the absolute encyclopedia on Jerusalem, on the maps, on the maps of Jerusalem, who will be giving us a really looking, and when I talked to him just before, I said looking forward doesn't sound appropriate to what Israel is trying to do to Jerusalem, but he will take us to 2050. What is the plan for Jerusalem from now on? Before Khalil, really delighted to welcome Fairouz Sharqawi. Fairouz is the executive director of Grassroots Al-Quds. You will have met her colleague Amani Khalifa, who came and spoke to us at PSC on 2 occasions as well. And I'm really delighted that Fairouz is joining us. So she will bring it back to a slightly sort of intermediate level of what is happening in other parts of Jerusalem and not just in Sheikh Jarrah. And then I'm particularly pleased that we have with us Nuha Atiyyah from Sheikh Jarrah. Nuha happens to be my late cousin Jamal's wife. So here I have a really strong connection with one of our speakers. So Nuha, who has become famously known as Khalid, which is her title, has been at the forefront of supporting people in Sheikh Jarrah. She is in Sheikh Jarrah herself, her family is. The last time I sat with her and with her late husband Jamal was in 2016 in December, because in 2017 I was turned back at Tel Aviv airport because of my activism. So I didn't see Jamal after that date, and I haven't seen Nuha since that date, but it's really nice to have her with us. So she will tell us very much about Sheikh Jarrah. What happened in Sheikh Jarrah, what is happening now, and then we'll move on to our next 2 speakers. And the target for the webinar is just around 1 hour. So I'm sure you will have lots of questions to ask our speakers. So I will be speaking to Nuha first, and I will be translating both to you the question, but to her, to you the answers, but to her the questions as we go through. So let me say hello to Nuha. مساء الخير Nuha.
مساك ومساء الجميع.
شكرا كثير على يعني وجودك الليله. حبيت في البداية يعني تعطينا الوضع الآن إيش في الشيخ جراح. So I'm just asking about what the situation is like now in Sheikh Jarrah. تفضلي.
احنا انا نهى عطية ام خالد من البيوت المهددة بالإخلاء، من ال 28 بيت المهددة بالإخلاء. احنا حوالي 500 شخص مهددين إن نطلع برا. حكمت المحكمة العليا في إنه إخلاء من البيوت. هلا احنا
خليني أترجم. So what Nuha is saying is she's really pleased to be speaking to you. She lives in one of the 28 houses that are under threat of eviction. That in fact the High Court has ruled that the houses should be evicted, and that amounts to about 500 people. تفضلي.
احنا طلعنا الهاشتاج انه انقذوا الشيخ جراح، لانه فيش في ايدنا نعمله. احنا عزل، لا في ايدينا اسلحه ولا في ايدينا شيء نقاوم. احنا كمان المنطقه الشماليه عن القدس والاقصى، مش بعيدين كثير. احنا المنطقه الحاميه القدس والاقصى، فكيف يعني؟
So what you're saying is that they've been facing this threat for some time. But the reason they set up the hashtag أنقذوا الشيخ جراح in Arabic, Save Sheikh Jarrah in English, was because they were left with nothing else that they could do. They don't have arms, they can't resist in any different way except by galvanizing support around the world for their cause.
هلا من لما شافونا بنقاوم يعني بالهاشتاج وصارت قضيتنا عالمية، صاروا يضيقوا علينا الخناق، وصارت حرب استنزاف، صاروا يجيبوا المستوطنين عنا يضربونا ويعتدوا علينا.
So since the hashtag became really successful, the Israelis became very aware of the developing situation, and so they started bringing settlers in to basically beat people up, to make their lives very difficult.
كمان حطوا لنا محاسيم على الأربع جهات، يعني تشيك بوينت يعني اللي بتسموها، جنود على 4 جهات.
Yeah, 4 checkpoints were set up, so you couldn't enter Sheikh Jarrah without the permission of a security person.
أي واحد بده يجي يزورني، أخوي، ابني، إذا عنوانه مش الشيخ جراح ممنوع يدخل.
So they stopped any Palestinians coming in unless they had their address as Sheikh Jarrah, whether it's a son, a daughter, a brother, or any other relative.
إحنا عايشين في حالة حرب. هاي مش قضاء ومحاكم، هاي عصابات المستوطنين اللي بتتهجم علينا.
So they live basically in a war zone. She says this is basically a set of gangs of settlers who are brought in to make their lives a real misery.
بعدين إحنا يعني حتى احتياجاتنا الأساسية بطلنا نقدر نطلع نجيبها، حاسين إنه زي سجن، منع تجاوز، سجن كبير إحنا عنا.
So they've been almost under curfew on a daily basis, so they can't even bring in their basic needs on a daily basis.
كمان لما الشباب بقعدوا بيتجمعوا خوف ما المستوطنين يتهجموا على الدور، لأنهم بيتهجموا على الدور وبرموا علينا أزايز وبرموا علينا حجار وبضربونا، ففي شباب متضامنين معنا بيجوا عنا. كمان هم بنضربوا وبيعتقلوا.
So what tends to happen is whenever the young people in Sheikh Jarrah get together, and I mean she was saying a little earlier, which I forgot to translate, that Sheikh Jarrah is to the north of Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's really the barrier, it's the next layer that surrounds the old city of Jerusalem. But basically, if the young people of Sheikh Jarrah sit in front of their homes, chat, the settlers come in, they throw bottles at them, and again, they make their lives a misery.
قبل 5 أيام هجموا علينا المستوطنين، أجوا متضامنين من جميع أنحاء القدس وتضامنوا معنا، ضربوهم قنابل صوت، غاز الفلفل رشوهم، جابوا سيارات من الغاز رشوا على البيوت. أنا أسعفت حوالي 20 واحد، هراوات، ضرب الهراوات، جروح، غاز الفلفل في العينين، قنابل الصوت على الباب، على الشبابيك، كسروا الأزاز علينا. ودخلوا علينا، اعتدوا على النساء والأطفال كمان.
Okay, so about 5 days ago, as an example, the groups of supporters wanting to express solidarity came to Sheikh Jarrah. The settlers, aided by the security forces, I'm not sure if they were police or border guards, would attack anyone who comes to support the Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah with pepper spray, with stun grenades, using their batons. Nuha is a nurse herself, and she says on that night she treated 20 people who had been injured as a result of the assault by the settlers.
كمان أخذت سيارات الإسعاف حوالي 8 على المقاصد و8 اعتقلوا في نفس اليوم.
So on the same day, 8 people were arrested and about 8 were taken away to Maqasid Hospital, just as an example of what happened. طب معلش بدي أسألك إن هلا هذه الشغلة بالنسبة للناس برا يعني بيشوفوا صورة بس أنتم عايشينها طول الوقت. فيعني كيف حياتكم اليومية، مخاوفكم بالذات من موضوع إنه إذا البيوت فضيت شو ممكن يصير. So I'm just asking you to tell us about the day. This is a snapshot, but on a daily basis, what are their fears? What do they fear for their homes even now before they are evicted? تفضلي.
احنا إلنا شهر ونص ما طلعناش، يعني إذا أنا طلعت على الشغل بترك 3 من أولادي باخذوا دوامهم، نسقنا إنه ناس دوامهم الصبح وناس دوامهم بعد الظهر، 3 بنتركوا بالدار، يعني إحنا مش كل العيلة بتطلع على الشغل صباحي، 3 بعد الظهر و3 بس الصبح.
So what they've had to do to make sure that settlers don't break into the homes, to take them over basically, is that they have phased the work pattern. So if Nuha goes out, at least there are 3 other people in the house, and then when she comes back, so all the time they maintain a number of people in the house to make sure that it's not taken by and I think, you know, for all of us here, imagine living this all the time. It is not a sort of a 1 day in 3 months. It is absolutely all the time. And the other thing that she mentioned, which I should mention, is that just out of the blue, they come in with the skunk spray and they spray the whole neighborhood with that, so that you can't even open the window to let some fresh air in. فحكيت لهم على موضوع المية العادمة اللي بيرشوها لأن أنت ذكرتيها إنه بضل and that lasts for many days.
يعني احنا بنضوي الكونديشنات وبنسكر الشبابيك مشان ما نشمش الريحة، يعني فيش بنفتحش الشبابيك.
So they always keep the windows shut. طب بدي أسألك بالنسبة مثلا البعثات الدبلوماسية اللي بالمنطقة بيجوا عندكم شو بيقولوا؟
هم اجت الوكاله واجت UNDP واجوا مجموعات حقوقيه، بس ما عملوا لنا شيء، يعني طلبنا منهم حتى تفريغ نفسي لسه ما بلشوش يعملوه، لانه اطفالنا تعرضت لاشياء نفسيه وصرنا في خوف وفي قلق وفي اضطرابات، والله يعني احنا عايشين في خوف، صرنا ننام في المناديل، كثير احنا صعبه حياتنا، صارت قلق، صرت تخاف على اولادك واولاد الجيران، يعني الجيران صاروا يتعاونوا مع بعض، صاروا يحبوا بعض، اذا هي طلعت من الدار تعطيني المفتاح عشان انا اطل على دارها مشان ما يدخلوش المستوطنين.
So I asked Nuha about the diplomatic missions in Jerusalem, whether they've been down, and I know that they have been, but she actually talked more about human rights organizations and people who've come to see what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah. But again, they all expressed their real worry and concern, but there have been no material actions that help the residents there. And that they've even got to the point now that they really live in fear, but also that if her neighbor has to leave her house for any reason, she gives her the key to make sure that they look after it. But that in a positive way, this has really brought that community together, which is a really positive thing. تفضلي.
بدي احكي لك اشي، حتى اللي بالسجن بعطوه استراحة ساعة، احنا ما بيعطونا استراحة لا ليل ولا نهار. يعني احنا عايشين في خوف، في قلق، في اضطرابات، في بتشوف ابنك مضغوط مش قادر يطلع، الاطفال عندنا مضطربين نفسيا خايفين يطلعوا من الجنود، كل هذه حوالينا. يعني احنا عايشين في حالة حرب، احنا مش قادرين نتحمل اكثر من هيك. بس
يعني
عشان عقيدتنا وديننا وإيماننا بأنه الوطن وطننا وهاي البيوت بيوتنا وهذا حقنا وهاي القضية قضيتنا، إحنا متحملين.
So basically, she says that there's a real need for human rights organizations. They need psychological help, particularly the young people, because they've been traumatized over the last 2 or 3 months, and nobody has come to listen to them, to hear their concerns, and that is a really difficult issue. That even in prison, prisoners get maybe an hour's relief a day. They have no relief whatsoever. They're under, they live in a state of war all the time. And they just want this to end. And of course, they want it to end by them staying in their homes. تفضلي.
أنا بحكي يعني إحنا في خوف، في حرب، بس يعني إحنا كتير يعني حابين إن هاي القضية تنجح، والناس يضلوا حاسين فيها وفي استمراريتنا عشان إنها تنجح. يعني يضل المتضامنين، يضل الإعلام يحكي معنا، يضل قضية الشيخ جراح قضية أساسية.
So she says that what they really want is for this issue, the Sheikh Jarrah in particular, but of course the wider issues that we'll hear about in a minute, to remain live, for people not to forget what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah, simply because there's an atrocity in another area. It started in Sheikh Jarrah this year, but it doesn't end there. But they want people to pressure their governments to do something to stop the possible eviction. هلا هاي رسالة أخذت منك رسالة أخيرة إذا بدك تضيفي شيء قبل ما أنتقل
بدي أضيف شيء، إنهم بحسسوك بالضعف لما بضربوا أولادنا قدامنا، مش قادرين ندافع عنهم، بحطوا حاجز، هم جنود بيننا وبين أولادنا. يعني أنا هديك اليوم لما كان مسكر علي الباب وأنا صرت أصيح وأنا في السجن الباستيل عشان ضربوا ابني قدامي، حسيت بقديش أنا ضعيفة مش قادرة أدافع عن ابني، بدي أبكي مش قادرة أبكي، بدي أدافع عن ابني مش قادرة. يعني عمرك حسيت تشوف ابنك من ضرب قدامك وانت مش قادر تعمل له شيء؟
She finishes with this. She says, just imagine parents who love their children, who will do anything for them, feeling so helpless when the settlers, the police beat them up. Her own son, who's been one of the group of young people who started this, what happened in Sheikh Jarrah, her own son was beaten up in front of her, and she felt helpless just trying to stop that from happening. How can anyone put up with seeing the children? And of course, he's not a child. He's, in fact, he's behind me in the picture to my right at the end. Murad, who is her son, being beaten up by the settlers and by the police. And I know that on the Eid, on the first day of Eid, he was arrested. اعتقلوه يوم العيد مش هيك؟
يوم العيد.
Yeah. So they live under this threat, and of course, some of them have jobs in Jerusalem, in the municipality, and other places, and they're fearful for their jobs as well because they're standing up to the Israelis. Okay. يعطيك العافية نهى. نشوف إذا في أسئلة بنرجع لك. شكرا لك. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم اللي سمعتوني وشكرا لكم.
She says, thank you very much for hearing me, and she's here to answer any more questions that you have. Thank you very much indeed, Nuha. Thank you. Okay, so some relief for Sheikh Jarrah. The checkpoints have been either sort of the tone has come down a little bit, or they've been moved off. Of course, the threat of eviction is still hanging over them because the court will still have to rule on this. In terms of the appeal that the residents have put in. And the court has basically said to the Sheikh Jarrah residents, you need to accept that you are tenants. So these people who have been living in these houses since 1956 and believe them to be their own houses, their property, are told that they must accept they are tenants to a settler organization in the US. It shows you how bizarre the whole thing is. And of course, it isn't a property dispute. This is very much a political act to fulfill Zionism. And we'll hear more about the plans for the future from Khalil in a minute, but I'm going to move over and welcome Fairouz Sharqawi. Thank you very much for joining us, Fairouz, and please give us your sort of summary of where things are, not only in Sheikh Jarrah, but Jerusalem as a whole, as we look at it at the moment.
Thank you, Kamel. Good evening, everyone. And I will start actually with your comment. I think you said something that's crucial to understand about what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah. This is not a legal property dispute. And that is why I use the term expulsion rather than eviction. I think that sometimes people can misunderstand what's happening and imagine that there is a settler organization and a Palestinian family and they have a dispute that is being settled in court. But I think that the best way to describe what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah would be by drawing a triangle, where on one side or one head of this triangle is the Israeli occupation authorities that make the legislation, that take the decisions, that create the policies and the long-term plans for Jerusalem. And Khalil will talk about these long-term plans after me. But the plans evolve and revolve around displacing as many Palestinians as possible from Jerusalem. So the hardship of these 28 families in Sheikh Jarrah is the political reality that all Palestinians in Jerusalem are facing. On the other side, or on the second head of this triangle, I would mention the Israeli occupation courts that are not neutral, that do not guard rights, and they are an actual integral part of the Zionist colonial project and system that is at work here in Jerusalem and elsewhere in Palestine. So they are the ones who fulfill these policies and translate them into realities and sign those so-called eviction orders against Palestinians. And then the third head of this triangle would be the settler organizations. And these are well-funded, very well-oiled settler organizations funded by Zionists, not only here in Palestine, but also Zionists from all over the world that have the means, they have the money, they have the long breath to drag families into decades of legal cases, exhausting families, and eventually translating this Zionist vision of Israelizing Jerusalem into reality. So I would be careful not to paint this as a property dispute happening in Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah. And right now, currently, other areas in Jerusalem are also facing the imminent threat of displacement, and tens of other families are facing that threat of being expelled from their homes, namely in two areas in Silwan. Silwan is another strategically located Palestinian community just outside the old city. Sheikh Jarrah is in the north and Silwan is just outside in the south. In Silwan, there are two neighborhoods. One is Batn al-Hawa, where also almost 80 families are facing the imminent threat of being expelled from their homes for similar claims. Like in Sheikh Jarrah, settler organizations are claiming the ownership over land over there, and the court is again supporting that and playing into it and issuing those orders. And in another place in Al-Bustan, where almost 90 houses, 88 houses have demolition orders over them because the Israeli occupation municipality wants to build a theme park, a so-called biblical park in that area. And for building the biblical park, they are going to demolish 88 Palestinian homes, displacing hundreds of Palestinians. In total, in Silwan, around 5,000 Palestinians are facing that imminent threat of being expelled, of being displaced, forcibly displaced from their lands and from their community. And so what we are talking about is a general policy of Zionizing Jerusalem, displacing as many Palestinians as possible. And these are systematic policies that have been put in place since 1967, since the occupation of the eastern part of occupied Jerusalem, systematically building towards expelling and displacing as many Palestinians as possible from Jerusalem while holding on to as much land as possible in Jerusalem. These displacement policies, and maybe people have been following the news and hearing also about other attacks on Palestinians, especially during the month of Ramadan around 2 months ago, the attacks on worshippers inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, where heavily armed occupation forces would go and use tear gas and stun grenades and the batons, attacking and using rubber-coated bullets everywhere in Jerusalem, injuring, severely sometimes injuring Palestinians. You might have heard about the mass incarceration and the huge number of arrests. Hundreds of Palestinians have been arrested in Jerusalem in the last few weeks. And again, this is a reminder that this is not just the reality that's been taking place in Jerusalem since April. It has been in the news, and you might have heard about it and read about it in social media and in webinars like this, but this is reality that Palestinians in Jerusalem have been facing since 1967. I mean, after the ethnic cleansing, total ethnic cleansing of the western part of Jerusalem in 1948, where no Palestinian communities were left, the Palestinian communities in the eastern part are facing this systematic displacement. And if Silwan and the Sheikh Jarrah are the ones that are in the news right now, and also Lifta. Lifta is an uprooted village, and one of the very few Palestinian uprooted villages, Nakba uprooted villages, that have some homes still standing. Now these homes, refugee homes, their owners might be living in the eastern part of Jerusalem just a few kilometers away and cannot return there and cannot claim their property back. Right now these homes are also part of a new project that is marketed as a touristic development project. These homes are planned to be demolished, and luxury hotels and touristic structures are going to be built there. So what also happens in Jerusalem is colonial expansion under the disguise of touristic development. That's another policy that is used against Palestinian presence and existence in Jerusalem. So it's important to see what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, what's happening in Silwan, what's happening in Lifta, and just outside Damascus Gate, the battle over the public sphere. You know, Damascus Gate is the main entrance to the old city. It is our city center. And even sitting there at the Damascus Gate Plaza, drinking coffee and tea is considered a threat by our colonizers. They fear our practice of belonging and ownership over Jerusalem. And so also during the month of Ramadan, they would put metal bars and barriers to prevent people from sitting on these stairs in front of Bab al-Amud, Damascus Gate, and practice again this belonging to the city. And so a lot of confrontation has been taking place. This confrontation is not new. This has been going on for decades. And this is the direct result of this vicious colonization that is threatening the Palestinian existence and presence in Jerusalem. And if we are naming only 3 or 4 neighborhoods in Jerusalem today, this does not mean that we forget about what's happening in Al-Isawiyya, what's happening in Sur Bahir, what's happening in other areas like Beit Hanina and Shu'fat, Jabal al-Mukabbir, and many, many others. So just a reminder, this hardship that we heard from Khalid, from Nuha, this is not just one family or 20 families or even 50 families. This is 350,000 Palestinian residents in Jerusalem who are facing that imminent threat of being displaced from their hometown.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One of the questions that has come through, I'll ask it now because it sort of builds on what's been said, is people say, well, first of all, there are 2 questions. One is, what conditions need to be met for the Israeli High Court to decide to evict Palestinians? And then, which is a strange sort of concept, but what is the threshold? And also, where do they go? Where do the people who are evicted, where did the families who were evicted from Sheikh Jarrah a few years ago go? I'll put that to you, Fairouz, if I may, the two questions.
I'll answer very quickly. First of all, again, this is a joint effort by the court and the settler organizations and the Israeli occupation authorities, and they work hand in hand. And so, for example, when it comes to Sheikh Jarrah or Batn al-Hawa, settler organizations provide documents that you never know whether these documents are real, are authentic or not. These documents are accepted unconditionally by the courts, while Palestinian documents, oftentimes brought from Istanbul or Ankara, from the Ottoman registry, and prove the ownership of Palestinian families over land or houses, and these documents are rejected by these courts. So again, I don't know where this question came from, but if the person who asked this question still believes that the Israeli court system can be a fair and just court system that is neutral, that Israel would like to market as the guardian of democracy and human rights, that is a bluff. And a witness on that would be the countless cases that we keep losing all the time. I mean, statistically, you see that these court systems are biased, not only biased, they are an integral part of the colonial system. Where do people go? Yes.
It's worth just explaining. I mean, a comment has just been made, and I think it is relevant, which is how can settlers have legal documents? So I know that generally they are referring to some tens of years ago, there having been Jews in that area, and that gives them the right to come and claim the land. If you want to just say a bit about that.
In some cases, yes. And I am always reluctant to go into details because I think we need to see the bigger picture. So yes, sometimes they provide fake documents that are literally fake, not authentic. And even if the documents are authentic, there is a clear double standard here. So we are talking about Jewish people who get to reclaim in the Israeli terms, reclaim property that they had or didn't have. I put a huge question mark over there before 1948, while Palestinian refugees uprooted from homes and lands that they have clear documentation and proof that they own, cannot get back that property. So again, I think that the court system is not a place where we Palestinians expect to get justice or to protect our rights. And just to answer the second question very quickly, because it is important, it's important also to say that this uprooting of Palestinians is part of a bigger policy of land confiscation, home demolition, and the intentional underdevelopment of Palestinian communities. And Palestinian communities are suffocated and surrounded by colonies, by colonial roads. And so there is no space left for Palestinians, and many of the families, when they are displaced and when they are expelled from their homes, they find themselves outside of Jerusalem, and that's exactly the goal. That's exactly the point, to send us out of the city, sometimes because of the lack of available housing, and sometimes because of the lack of affordable housing, because Jerusalem is an awfully expensive city. The whole experience of getting your house taken away from you, this is also taken away a livelihood from Palestinians. Many people cannot afford renting a house inside Jerusalem or inside the wall boundaries because real estate prices are very high, and these families cannot afford it. And in other cases, there aren't homes available for these families. So these families find themselves outside of Jerusalem, which is exactly the point and exactly the goal that Israel is shamelessly talking about openly in its documents. And I will leave this to Khalil to talk about. In their long-term plans for Jerusalem, they shamelessly and rudely and boldly talk about evicting as many Palestinians as possible.
Thank you very much indeed, Fairouz, for your remarks. They're really enlightening, and I think begin to move us from the very immediate threat to individuals like Nuha to the wider threat in a number of areas, and now to Khalil to tell us about, as I say, the future the plans for Jerusalem, the city that we Palestinians always call Al-Quds. We don't call it Jerusalem, or we don't need to call it anything else. And it is Al-Quds to us. So Khalil, you're muted at the moment. If you'd like to unmute and give us your remarks, please. And tell me if you want me to show the presentation whenever you want to, but you're still muted. Still muted.
Khalil al-mic.
Yeah. No, once it goes, I will feel much happier. I don't know if I can unmute you. Ask to unmute. Try that.
Hello?
Welcome.
Hello?
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Jamal. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Khalil Tafakgi. I'm Director of Maps Department at Orient House. Orient House was, until now, it's closed now, but it's like embassy, Palestinian embassy inside East Jerusalem, which was occupied after 1967. Still now, I am monitoring settlement since 1983 until now, and I am in part of the Palestinian negotiation for final status about Jerusalem and settlement and borders. First of all, when we speak about Jerusalem, in my opinion, I think that it's necessary to speak what's mean Jerusalem, because under British mandate is different as today, under Ottoman period is different as today. Now, if you're looking for the presentation, the first one, we call it Al-Quds Sharif. It's 1 square kilometer. It mean the old city. Old city since 4,000 years ago until 1917. This is what we call it Al-Quds Sharif under Ottoman period. Now, after the occupation 1917 until 1948, we call it Jerusalem under British mandate. It's 21 square kilometer. Now, after 1967, 48, Jerusalem divided for two cities, East and West. East, it's 2 square kilometer. West is around 18 square kilometer. So since 1967, when the Israel occupied East Jerusalem, they expand the border of Jerusalem from 6.5 square kilometer to 72 square kilometer. So East and West today is 126 square kilometer, and we call it Jerusalem, which was annexed after 1967. This is what we call it Jerusalem, and we have Jerusalem. We call it according to United Nations Resolution 181, which was published in 1947. We call it International Jerusalem. International Jerusalem is complete until now. Yes, you see the presentation now. This is until now, nobody recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. According to this,
I'm sorry, give me one.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
According to United Nations Resolution 181, nobody recognized Jerusalem as a capital of Israel. So Trump, when he recognized Jerusalem as a capital of Israel, it means he against the United Nations Resolution 181. This is one. Now, Jerusalem today is 1.2% of West Bank. Now, Israel now looking for the future, not only looking for today. Like now they have a plan to what we call it 2050. What's mean 2050? It means Jerusalem how will be. How will be, and yeah, this is international. Now this is the green line, and it is Jerusalem. After. Yeah, this is Jerusalem today, East and West. This is what we call annexation Jerusalem, or Jerusalem municipality, which was annexed after 1967. So this is what we call it geopolitics. Geopolitics, it means that this is the border of Jerusalem. And today, when we speak about Jerusalem, this is what we call it Jerusalem, according to the Israel vision for the future.
And this
now,
is
yes.
Yes.
This is 1.2% of West Bank. East and West today is one. But Now the Israel looking for the future. They want to expand the border of East Jerusalem from 126 square kilometer to 500. Now, as you see in the red, this is the land which was confiscated for public purposes according to the British mandate 1843. This is according to the British mandate law. This is confiscated land. This is because the aim of how they control East Jerusalem, they used many laws. One of them is confiscated for public purposes. The second is planning and zoning. What's mean planning and zoning? Planning and zoning, the next please. Planning and zoning, it's mean that the land, yeah, you see the green, around 52% of the land is a green area. What's mean a green area? Green area, it's for Palestinians, it's impossible to build any housing, and if they build as Bustan, what Fairouz mentioned, it means that they built illegal, so they want to demolish. But for the Israel, they can change it from green to yellow. It means they can make it as residential area. Now, the Israel policy, they have, after 1967, they have two policies to the East Jerusalem. One, the land. Until now, since according to the Israel law, they confiscated 87% of East Jerusalem from 1967. 87% of East Jerusalem under Israel control now by using many laws. It's been as they can green planning and zoning, absentee property law, for public purposes, for roads, as you've seen, etc. Now, this is the aim. So the Israel went for geography. Now they jump to demography. What's mean demography here? Demography is mean they need minority Palestinian, majority Israel. The plan is today is according to the Israel policy to minimize the Palestinian to 12% of the population. I mean East and West Jerusalem. What's mean here? What's mean here about minority Palestinian, majority Israel? They confiscated the land. It means the Palestinians, they have no spare land to build a house. They emigrate outside Jerusalem border. It means that they lose their ID card. Because according to the Israel law, we, the Palestinian who living in this area, we are resident, not citizen. So if you leave the border of Jerusalem for 5 years or 7 years, it means that you can lose your identity, so you became bidun. What's mean bidun? It mean without, or what we call it in legal or popular language, gypsy. Gypsies mean that he has no ID. Now, this is the Israel policy. So they started to confiscate the land. The second, demolishing housing. In the same time, if you're looking for the picture today about, yeah, this is about Sheikh Jarrah. We want to focus about Sheikh Jarrah. Why Sheikh Jarrah? The Israel policy to minimize the Palestinian inside Jerusalem. As I told, confiscated land, demolishing houses, losing their ID. The last one is what we call it the wall, which was built and now behind the wall it's around 150,000 Palestinians. They want to lose their and they have a huge plan for this issue. Hayim Ramon plan, Herzog today it's Herzog. I mean today is I think that the resident of Israel. So they want to send all the Palestinians to the West Bank. In the same time, they want to expand the border of Jerusalem to go to the Jordan Valley until south of Bethlehem. I mean to Gush Etzion. So the aim of this is demography. According to this plan, now they want to isolate all the Palestinian built-up area. If looking for this map, the brown or yellow, this is the Palestinian built-up area surrounded by settlement, and the green area. Now in Sheikh Jarrah, the south, south of this, you put the mouse here. Here, this is area. Now, nobody know that between 48 until 1967, there is an Israel land inside Jordanian area. So every 2 weeks, the food coming from West Jerusalem to this area. Now, after 1967, the Israel directly confiscated around 3,000 dunums or 300 hectares from Palestinian to make links between Hadassah campus or Hebron University and West Jerusalem. So why is Sheikh Jarrah now? This is the plan to make connection between Mount Scopus and West Jerusalem, and in the same time isolated all the Palestinian area and surrounded by settlement, and in the same times, not isolated, all the Palestinian divided for security. Now, if somebody come to support the people in Sheikh Jarrah, he can't enter to this area. This is the aim. In the same time, they want to minimize the Palestinian. As you see here, this is a settlement, and this is the Palestinian built up area, the brown. Now, in the end, Sheikh Jarrah to make, in 1990, Sharon, in that time, he was Ministry of Agriculture. He put a plan, they call it 26 gates around Jerusalem. It means that where is empty land to make, he want to build a settlement in this area. Sheikh Jarrah, a good example. This quarter was established in the end of 19th century. Between 1948 until 1997 was, in that time, there is a consulate, Arab consulate, Lebanese, Syrian, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, and European. Until now, British, we have French and Spain and Belgium, etc. So now to make connection and isolated by all the Palestinian built up area in the north and in the south, they want to make dams of settlement and outposts of settlement to make links between Hadassah campus or Hebron University and West Jerusalem. Now, when you speak about the Jewish poverty, okay, this is not Jewish poverty or this is Jewish poverty, because you know that the Jewish living inside in Arab country everywhere. We have Moroccan Jewish, we have Palestinian Jewish, we have Syrian Jewish, we have Egyptian Jewish. So before 1948, there is a Jewish living inside East Jerusalem, living in Palestine in that time. So we have no problem about the Jewish. We have a problem with the Zionists. Because in that time, the Israelites say that this is our property. Okay, this is your property. We have around 13 quarters in West Jerusalem, like Talbiya, like Mr. Jamal, he has a property in West Jerusalem. Let's speak to Mr. Jamal and to take his property in West Jerusalem, and he can put his flag, Palestinian flag, in West Jerusalem. In my opinion, I think that we come to the end now. Now, in the end, the Israel looking for the future. What's mean the future? The future, it means how will be Jerusalem. Jerusalem, according to the Israel, will be metropolitan Jerusalem. It's not Jerusalem as today. Metropolitan Jerusalem, we can speak about 10% of West Bank. Today is 1.2% of West Bank. Tomorrow, or 2050, will be Jerusalem. This is a good example here. Har Homa or Jabal Abu Ghraim, let's them back, was a green area, and this is how today. This is how we can monitoring settlement by aerophoto. Now, in 2050, the Israel looking to go to the, a good example here, as we have another settlement, how this is today, 2011, this is 14, and now the future, 17, and we can looking for the future. This is the plan for the future today. Now this is for the future, the green, this is the future. And now Israel focusing for this issue to expand the settlement and to demonize the Palestinian, to push all the Palestinian behind the wall or outside Jerusalem. In the same time, they want to annex all the settlement, which today is outside Jerusalem, to Jerusalem, and we call it metropolitan Jerusalem. What's mean Jerusalem? They want to build a big airport in Nabi Musa, Jordan Valley. It will be the biggest airport in the Middle East. At the same time, they want to expand all the settlement and to make links, and to make, in the same time, railway, to make links between the airport and Jerusalem. Now, we are going to the end. Why today Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan? Silwan is part of, this is the outpost of surrounded Jerusalem. This is Silwan is part of this is the Holy Basin. As you see, this is the Bustan, and the outpost, archaeological Bustan. This is to make link. This is south, this is Silwan. North is, this is the outpost inside Silwan area. The green is settlement in Ras Al Amud. The blue this is archaeology places, according to the David village. Al Bustan is the south. This is red, like red. This is Al Bustan. The green close to the red. It's here close. This is Batn Al Hawa. You can see the outpost inside the Palestinian. How will be the outpost inside the Palestinian area, built up area? According to them, they want to push all the Palestinians in this area in the same time to make, we call it not dams, but we call it dams of outposts to make to divide it between the Palestinian built up area, and in the end, all the Palestinians will go outside Jerusalem. And this is the aim. And if you have any questions, I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalil. What a whistle-stop tour into the future this is. But clearly, the main aim is that, or the key point here is that this is a plan. It isn't a sort of haphazard, we do something, see what happens. How do we encircle the Palestinian communities with settlements so they become isolated? I mean, some of you may have seen in Bethlehem, where you have a house surrounded by a wall from almost all sides. So in a way, it's the same, but surrounded by settlements. And I remember when one of the last times I visited Jerusalem, being driven by one of my relatives, who said, just look at the quality of the road as we move from a Palestinian area into just the road itself, just driving. So this side you have houses for Palestinians, or up to this point, and then suddenly, the wider road, the traffic lights, the well-kept sort of verges and so on, as you move into the settlement area. You leave that, you come to another Palestinian area. Again, the quality deteriorates. So this is a plan. And although we're very concerned and angry about what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, it is just a small example of what Israel is trying to do, planning to do, unless, of course, it is stopped. And it's no good, our Western leaders just saying we express concern. I mean, this morning, I think it was this morning, maybe, or was it yesterday, when they demolished a commercial building in Al Bustan, the EU mission in Jerusalem put this is bad. Really? At the same time, the EU embassy in Jerusalem was saying we are deepening our partnership with Israel. So you see, this is the double standards that operates, that everyone, all of us, should be working to pressure our governments on. And I know that there are a number of events coming up. As you know, there's the Lobby of Parliament on the 8th of July. There's also, and I'm sure James has put all the details in here, but maybe we can repeat some of them. Lobby of Parliament on the 8th of July. I haven't heard from my own MP, but I'm trying. But we should all keep trying, just keep trying. Because every time their assistant comes and says, oh, we've had another email from X about Palestine, at least it annoys them, and let us annoy them until they respond to us and we're able to go and talk to them, because it isn't just preaching to the converted MPs. It is these MPs who are not on board at all that we need to get to. And I get from my MP here the standard Foreign Office message about everything. We're for a two-state solution. Really? If you were, you'd be working really hard to make it happen, but it doesn't look as if you are. Okay, moving on to some questions. Let me just pick out some that I saw as we were going through the chat here. There've been lots of comments. I think Khalil talked about the altering demographics, that there was a question about that, how they are doing it. I mean, I can tell you that families in East Jerusalem struggle for the following reason. I mean, there are lots of reasons, but one of them is they have children, babies. They grow up to be 18, 19-year-olds. They need to get married. They need somewhere to live. If they try and build on top of their own houses, they apply for a permit, they won't get one. So they build without, they come and knock it down. So that means that in terms of demographics, the young people have to move out of Jerusalem in order to find somewhere to live, which is by design. There's a question, I don't know, maybe Nuha can help us. بالنسبة للحنون عيلة الحنون والغاوي اللي تهجروا من فترة أظن 2010 ولا أنا غلطان حدا يذكرني
2009 2/8/2009
ففي سؤال بيقول شو صار للعائلات هاي أولا وين صفوا وثانيا هل في إمكانية إنهم يعاودوا يرجعوا إذا بتحكي لنا ونسمع من الآخرين برضو إذا بتعرفي إشي يا أخت نهى.
أنا بعرف إنهم مستأجرين في مناطق بالقدس يعني لسه ما طلعوا من القدس بس هم بالأجار كانت الدار هون ملكهم بس هم هلا بالأجار دار حنون ساكنين بالطور دار الغاوي ساكنين بالشرفات.
Okay. Khalil, I don't know if you want to add something. So what Nuha said was that both families are living still in Jerusalem, but they're renting. So of course, having owned the house and not having had to pay out rent, first of all, their houses were taken away and settlers moved in. But at the same time, they are having to pay rent. And as I said, as their children grow up to be people of marriage age, and in Palestine, people get married at the age of sort of 22, 23, 24. So suddenly you've got 5 children and one after the other. You need to not only pay for their marriage, but they need to find somewhere to live and a job. And that's the other thing. The types of...
بيعملوا زيارات لبيوتهم بيجوا عنا يعني بتضامنوا.
لا بحكيش معك هو.
It's okay. معلش نهى معلش. And she's basically, Nuha was saying that they come and look at their houses, they confront the settlers, but they're powerless at the moment. But basically, I think this is in terms of the demographics, think of it as I say, families have children, they need to get jobs, they go to university, they get jobs, they need to marry. They find it difficult to find somewhere to live in Jerusalem. And the quality of jobs available is not really as high as you might think. So, I mean, this morning, a bus driver was beaten up by settlers, a Palestinian bus driver. So they have to take jobs, as bus drivers and other things because they can't normally find jobs in the qualifications that they've managed to achieve. So that's the demography and pushing people out.
This is the aim. The aim. The aim, demography now, today, the fighting in Jerusalem is demography. 12% will be Palestinian, 88 will be Israel. Because they need as a capital of Israel. They say this is our capital. It's not the Palestinian capital. So we have 2 ways to fight inside Jerusalem. We lose geography, I mean land. And now because this is in Sheikh, Jarrah and Silwan, we have another job that it means that ethnic cleansing for the Palestinian outside Jerusalem. As I told in the beginning, we are resident, not citizen.
Yes. And I mean, it is, if people say, don't say it's ethnic cleansing. Well, ask yourself this. They move Palestinians out. They never move Palestinians in. They move settlers in. I mean, it is by design. So this is exactly what they try to do. I'm just looking at other questions to see if I've missed any. I'm just reading something about, and they're asking, there's a question about, do people know that there are Jews who support the Palestinians in Jerusalem? They are
minority. It's not, it's like Naturi Carter from Meretz or somebody. It's not, but most, I don't speak about most, more than 60% of the Jewish against the Palestinians, especially today, as you know, that Bennett and the Likud party, and not only Likud and Mi'rach. And you remember that when he was, Tidi Kulik was the mayor of Jerusalem, all the confiscated land under Israel control, which Jerusalem, what we call it, next Jerusalem, is confiscated under, not the Likud, under Tidi Kulik when he was in Liberal Party.
in the
So
labor.
right, and the Liberal Party.
Okay, I think we're going to begin to bring this to a close. So I'm just going to go to a minute or a couple of minutes, any final points that people want to end with. So I will start with Nuha. بس بالنهاية نهى إذا في عندك أي تعليق أخير مطلب بتطالبي فيه، هدول كلهم متضامنين، فإذا بتحبي تطلبي إشي عشان نحاول ننهي.
بس بدي أحكي يسعد مساك، وإنتوا سمعتونا كثير، وبدنا تطلعوا قضيتنا للرأي العام، يعني يضل التضامن زي ما هي عالميا، يضل الاستمرارية ويضل المتضامنين. وبعدين إحنا عزل، فيش في ايدينا أسلحة، هم حاملين جميع أنواع الأسلحة، بطخونا برصاص مطاط، بطخونا برصاص حي، يعني مش قادرين، مش عارفين إحنا شو نعمل.
Okay, so in our final comments, Nuha, first of all, thanks you all very much for attending and for raising the Palestinian issue. She just reminds everyone that in Sheikh Jarrah, because that's what she came to talk about tonight, you know, they're peaceful people. All they want is to remain in the houses that they own. They believe that they own them, and all they want is to remain in their houses. But they're facing intimidation and settler violence and police violence, using sophisticated sort of weapons to make their lives complete miseries. Fairouz.
Yes, just an invitation to everyone to visit our website, grassroots.alquds.net, to read more about the systematic displacement, because I've seen people asking questions and that we did not get the chance to go into details about. And secondly, a reminder, this ethnic cleansing, and it is literally an ethnic cleansing that is happening here, is funded by your government. Your government trades arms with the Israeli occupation authorities, and your government enables this colonization, and even internal legislation now. I mean, look at the definition, the legal definition of what anti-Semitism is in the UK today, and you can see another big problem, because anti-occupation today has become anti-Semitism. That's the wrong equation. That's a bad turn for the public discourse about what's happening in Palestine. And there is a strong correlation between your own freedom inside the UK and your government's public policy and foreign policy on Palestine. And I think that as long as only hegemonic voices get to be expressed freely in the UK, and anything that criticizes, any voices that criticize the occupation and colonization of Palestine are silenced even legally. I mean, let's face it, I was talking about the Israeli court system, which is unjust. Your own court system is becoming unjust as well, or has been unjust as well. So just a reminder, it's all related. And I think that, and I saw questions about BDS. Of course, BDS, boycott and divestment, is important, because this very expensive project here, colonial project, is funded and enabled by governments and corporations around the world.
Thank you very much indeed, Fairouz. And I will add my voice and PSC's voice of, first of all, of course, support for BDS, but also to thank our Jewish friends and supporters for they really face, you know, absolutely despicable attacks simply for raising their voice as human beings who care about other people like the Palestinians. I mean, to think that I know Al-Kurd family have have property in Haifa, they're being threatened with eviction, but at the same time, they can't claim their property in Haifa. That's unacceptable. Other families are from West Jerusalem and can't go back to their homes, but the claim by the settlers that they own the land means that they might have to, they'll be evicted and have to move elsewhere. It is completely unacceptable, and our government here in the UK is absolutely complicit. It is nice that the British consul who lives and works in Sheikh Jarrah goes down to speak to the families every now and then, and he has his photo opportunities. It's interesting, I don't know if some of you have picked this up, since the UK left the EU, when the EU used to put out a statement, they'd say, EU member states condemn this, that, or the other. Now they have to say EU and like-minded states, i.e. the UK, because we're no longer in the EU. This is how the situation has shifted for people in the UK. So we need to continue to pressure. By all means, tweet at the consulate in Jerusalem and ask them to act, not simply to use mealy-mouthed words, as Boris Johnson did the other day when he was asked a question by Keir Starmer. He's probably one question on Palestine that we've heard in recent times, that he said, we are for a two-state solution. Well, make sure it can happen then. You know, whatever you feel about it, if the UK says that's our policy, it can't just simply say we express concern about settlements. I leave the final word to Khalil, please. Looking to the future, how can we stop this?
Stop this is mean that as a person who is living inside Jerusalem, I am looking for my children, for my future. But I don't see any future until now, because you know that the government and what we call it, their ideology, they don't see any Palestinian in this area. They don't need any Palestinian. But in my opinion, I think that our future will be in this area. And I hope that our colleagues from outside the country, from British, from the whole world, will be support us to save the problem and to say for everybody, peace is better than war.
Thank you so much, Khalil, for your concluding words. I'd like to thank our speakers. It's been so wonderful to host you tonight for the first time at the PSC event, and we hope this will be the first of many. Thank you all very much indeed. Certainly, to Nuha, we say we obviously all stand with the people of Sheikh Jarrah, we stand with the people of Silwan, we stand with the people of other areas in Jerusalem under threat. And indeed, even in Area C in the West Bank, where people are really under threat of losing their homes of whatever quality. And I always say, when you think that in the UK we say an Englishman's house is his castle, just think if your house was under threat, how would you go to sleep? Thank you very much indeed for your support. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.